If you're going to rent out your Los Angeles home to a tenant, you need to be aware of a really sophisticated rental scam that is happening a lot more often here in Los Angeles. Let me tell you about the story of this nice couple that bought a property in Mid-Wilshire. The LA Times just reported on this story and it is absolutely bonkers, so make sure you pay attention if you're thinking about renting out your house. This couple bought a home in Mid-Wilshire. They paid $1.7 million for this property, and it was very nice. It had a guest house, which was very appealing to them because they could use it for some rental income. And it was really appealing to a lot of tenants because multiple people could live in that property and share the expense. So they listed it for $8,500 a month, and they had multiple applicants. They decided to go with the first tenant, which owned a company that went belly up 3 months later. So they ended up getting out of that property. Now, when they went to put it back on the market 3 months later, one of the same applicants that applied 3 months ago applied for it again. So that was kind of a little bit of a red flag, but maybe they just really liked this property and they weren't under any kind of time constraints, right? They met this prospective tenant at the property. Now, this guy was driving a Tesla. He had a Rolex watch. All his bank statements said they had over $1 million in the bank. So on paper, he seemed really great. He said things like, I'm going to take really good care of this property. I'm going to put a rug down to make sure the floors don't get damaged. And he seemed really nice. So they ended up renting to this person. And he asked, when they signed the lease, he asked if he could move in a few days early. So they granted that because he was great. Everything looked good on paper. And things were going great for 16 months until one day the home alarm kept getting triggered over and over and over again. So ADT called the police out to the property. When the owner found out about this, the owner called ADT, and ADT said, well, the Airbnb guest kept accidentally tripping the alarm. And the owners were like, wait a minute, we don't have any Airbnb guests. Our lease specifically says that you cannot do any kind of short-term rental in this lease. So they confront the tenant. The tenant says, I'm not going to talk to you, talk to my attorney. So this tenant was not actually living in this property. In fact, this guy was not even living in the country. He's a touring musician who's in the UK right now. So what he decided to do was illegally list both the main house and the guest house on Airbnb and rent it out. And how is that possible? Let me show you how he did it. This is how he scammed Airbnb and the owners. He listed the properties, both the main house and the guest house, as the address is 1830 South La Brea Drive. That is the address of Starlight Inn, which is a hotel. Anytime that you're putting an address in Airbnb and it is a hotel, they do not check and require the city registration in order to put the listing up. So he was able to get around that. The second thing that he did was he did not put a picture of the front of the unit. So it was much harder to tell what the houses looked like. If the owner saw the front of their house, they would obviously know that it's being listed on Airbnb. So what he did is he put a picture of the Grove instead, and then he had interior photos of both units. If you watched my other video about Airbnb requirements, there are a ton in Los Angeles. You can watch a video right here and check out all those requirements for Airbnb. But he got around that and he was able to get people to book pretty quickly. He had over 100 reviews and most of them were in the 4.6 and 4.7 review range. That's pretty good for an illegal Airbnb. And he was making over $13,000 a month on average. Some months were making even more. He was doing this for at least 16 months before he got caught. So after the owners confronted him and he said, talk to my attorney, he stopped paying his rent. However, he still continued to rent out his Airbnb. The owners complained to Airbnb multiple times, and when the listing would get taken down, he would just do another listing under a different name, and he kept doing this over and over and over again. And because California is such a pro-tenant state, the owners couldn't just change the locks because they would be opening themselves up to legal damages, which could be very, very expensive. So instead of going the crazy rogue route, they decided to go the legal route. They sued him and they went through the eviction process. All the while, they don't have access to their house. They can't get into the house and address any kind of damages that are happening. And they're losing money because the tenant is not paying rent anymore. So they had to hire an attorney. They lost over $100,000 in attorney fees, and not to mention damages to the property. The process to evict a tenant in Los Angeles can take at least 35 to 45 days. Sometimes it could take months because the eviction courts are so backed up because during COVID, they weren't allowing any kind of evictions. So as of March of 2023, they started doing evictions once again, and they had a huge backlog. And just to give you some perspective, they bought this property in March of 2022. And just last week, they were granted a writ of possession from the sheriff, which allows the sheriff to go in there and take possession back of the property. But the sheriff is 3 months behind. So they have to wait another 3 months in order to get their property back. If you were planning to rent out your property here in the Los Angeles area, you need to be really diligent about who you're renting it out to, because these scams are happening more and more often. You need to do a background check, an FBI check, a credit check, a rental check, references, check their social media. Make sure that you are looking at every possible avenue of who this person is that is going to rent your property. These owners thought that they had done a good job with this, but you never know who is going to rent your property. So just be really cautious. And if you don't want to deal with renting your property and dealing with all the headaches and all the crap that these sophisticated renters and scammers are doing, I am more than happy to help you sell your house. My name is Felipecrook with eXp Realty. I've been a realtor for over 21 years, and I love helping people in the greater Los Angeles area buy and sell a home. If you have any questions, please give me a call at 213-268-6832. Again, my name is Felipecrook with eXp Realty, investing in your dreams.